I guess we're going to start like this. Um, I don't know how did you sleep last night?
Yo, I had a really well. I had dreams. I had lots of dreams. I don't
Well,
know. Do you remember your dreams?
I remember them lately. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't know what the last one you remembered was, but the one I remembered last night was I was down south, like in some place that looked like Texas or Houston or New Orleans or something like that, riding around the city with my father. And then we got out to go down this alleyway, which more felt like an alleyway you see in London, like with
Uh-huh,
shops on each side of the alley,
uh-huh.
little shops. My dad was looking at some antiques, a row of antique stores. Anyway, it went on from there because I woke up like, whoa, it was way out. but yeah, I slept all right. How'd you sleep?
Yeah, I last night I slept well. Kara has this tea that she. I said, "Can I have some of that tea that you like? Sparingly. There's like only a little." Her friend sent it from California. It's chamomile tea with a little bit of saffron, and
Nice.
gives a soft sleep.
Yeah.
I've been dreaming about the past a lot too,
Right.
but I like that picture of your dad that you had on Instagram, and
Yeah.
you look like your dad.
Yeah. A lot of people say that. And then when I see younger images of my father, it's pretty striking how close how many features we share. It's kind of so even if I go around the city in Houston, people will be like, "Oh, you must be Andy Moran's son." So
Yeah.
you can't get away from it, which I guess, as children, right? Like, your father was a pilot, right?
Yes, pilot.
You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that, I mean, um, well, you got to have the afro like your dad. I think it's great. But it,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because you are from Houston, right?
Yeah, from Houston. And, like growing up in the 70s, it kind of had a certain feel. But my real pivot was really kind of like becoming a teenager in the 80s, and in the 80s, hip hop seemed to be finding its way across the globe, let alone across America. And, by the time the 80s came, mid 80s to late 80s, it was just this moment of kind of like awakening. At one point, I was also finding the music of Thelonious Monk, jazz music, etc. And then
Uh-huh.
the other was like I was really just listening to mostly hip hop, and because it was the music of my generation, and also it was the music of the generation following the Black Power movement too. So there was something kind of still embedded in that music that was like brand new, hadn't been totally commercialized beyond comparison to the way it is now. Something about like seeing that come from New York City or come from out in Los Angeles and the Bay Area come down to Houston, and Houston trying to build up its own scene of music too. But then when I got to New York, I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. Seeing, we talk about this a lot, but like
Yeah,
seeing even your images that you took of like Brand Nubian, of De La Soul, like
yeah,
of these bands that for me it was as much about what they sounded like, but the images that you have that you made of them also made them feel like totally like people rather than kind of like supreme beings. They were just like citizens.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That basically you know why that happened that way was because, like when I tell people I'm shy, they always laugh because I have such a big mouth and I can make my way into things. But that's really like how I make up for being shy. And when I was doing those pictures, yeah, the other day I was just listening to Poor Righteous Teachers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I photographed them. And I photographed those guys for the Amsterdam News.
Wow,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
amazing.
And it was a story about 5% Nation
Right,
band, like kind of like Brand Nubian, but Poor Righteous Teachers.
right.
And then I just remember that I didn't know what to tell those guys. Like I
Mm,
met them somewhere, somewhere wherever they lived,
right,
and I wasn't gonna tell them how to pose or anything. So they would always just end up just being there and
right.
me taking the picture. So that gave you that sort of.
Yeah, but do you? I mean, like every one of the images also feels like extremely natural, And I've done enough photo shoots with photographers to know, like, oh God, like it's very difficult for me to do that. But you know, how do you get people to relax, like around the lens, you know?
Well, I just photographed you last week for your album.
Right.
I think I get people to relax because I don't have assistants. I just have the camera. I
Mm,
sort of, maybe it looks like I'm fumbling or something, you know.
mm.
But then, you know, I don't look that focused, but I'm hyper focused, you know. I'm hyper focused on what needs to be done.
Right.
And also I try to make room for uh, some sort of freedom where the person, you know, I mean, I might say, let's walk over there, or let's walk over here, but I don't, there's not too much directions. Or I might say like, look off, or, you know,
Right.
um, I mean, I think really, you know, because at the museum now they have the movie The Park. I think the way I made that movie is really the way my approach is. Like I would always go by that park, and I was that basketball court in the park, in Fort Greene Park. And what fascinated me about it was that it had no fence around it,
Mm,
because
mm-hmm,
most basketball courts are fenced in. And
mm-hmm.
the other thing that always fascinated me is that there was always people playing of different ages, and even young kids. If you saw like a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old with an 8-year-old, the 12-year-old would give the 8-year-old a chance, even
Right.
though he could block every shot and totally destroy him. That would not happen. It was
Mm,
an understanding, and then the way I filmed it is I just, you know, I had a DP, a director of photography, but basically because he had the camera, and we set up the tripod, we put the camera on it, rolled out a blanket, opened a bottle of wine, had some snacks, and just let the camera run
right.
for 42 minutes,
Yeah.
and then 18 minutes from the other end, from the reverse angle,
Right.
and that's all. And I decided on it done on one day. I told my friend, we just do it on Wednesday at whatever it was, 3,
Mm-hmm,
and I'll accept what happens. And
mm-hmm.
I think that's what often my work is about, that I accept what happens.
Yeah, that texture reads. I mean, it reads in the still images, it reads in the moving images, it reads in the shadow, it reads in somebody's like slight smile, you know, like all the portraits you've taken. That stuff reads, you know, and as musicians, you know, musicians, we make in real time. So there is no back, you know, it just is only forward. And it takes a while to get used to it, you know, to get used to, I wouldn't even say the mistake, you know, what did you talk about? What is, and to get used to it, you know, there's this, I can't recall the quote exactly, but there was something about what the drummer Art Blakey said to one of his musicians in his band, the Jazz Messengers,
Mm-hmm.
is he said, well, when you make a mistake, you know, play it twice. You know, like, nah, come back over it. You know what I mean? Like, because he's saying for me, to what it seems like he's saying is like, nah, that's actually right. And if you say it again to yourself, you'll find that it's right. And it's not even like about right, it's just what it is. And most of what makes like effective art is part, you know, like what people decide, what the artist decides to make the is, you know, whether it's the sound or the way Thelonious Monk or Cecil Taylor moves a chord, you know, the way Art Blakey press rolls on the snare, you know, that you then say, oh no, that's like, I mean, like what we say in Houston is about the slang, you know, like it's the slang. Like I always know who they are because of what they say is, you know.
Well, you know, the mistake I embrace, you know, fully. I mean, as an artist, um, because um, because a lot of people ask me, because I put out a lot of books,
Mm,
and you know, and there's like a lot of photos, and then they ask about editing, and I'm like, well, you know, I didn't do a lot of editing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I actually have a website up now called Marcopoulos.tv that shows some of my movies, and one of the movies is like an hour long of illegal drag racing illegal drag car racing in the Bronx and Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I shot like 6 hours of there. But basically what I decided in the end to make the film is like the first hour of footage that I shot. It's unedited. It's just all straight from the camera. So it is full of mistakes, but it's also full of soul, and it's full of life, and it's full of life, because there's because you can see when I get distracted, or when I, or when the cars are coming, they're going fast, you can see me move,
Yes. That the way I guess you would start or stop any of the film on that is also decision making. Like, okay, now let me stop to move over here, or like the flinch. Like when you flinch when you hear a sound too. That's how it is. I think when I saw the park for the first time in Paris, I remember seeing the show, right? So there's a lot of video in the show with all the monitors, like in an installation, and then going to that back room. Right, it was on the wall in the back room. And I just sat there for a while, like looking at the game. And the game ain't like on the court. The game is like, Brooklyn, Fort Greene life. It's a constant game, for all of us, especially now, like how do you elude COVID? But and it made me think, and I think I wrote you. It was like, and I was thinking like, this musician his name was Brother Ah, like AH, and he played French horn for Sun Ra's band, so he was in the orchestra, but he also played French horn with Thelonious Monk in this great concert called Monk at Town Hall from 1959, Town Hall here in New York City. And so I met Brother Ah, we were doing a talk together at the Kennedy Center, and he was talking about Thelonious Monk and movement, like how the body moves, right? And he said, oh, Thelonious, he would sit and watch basketball games for a long time, and then he would go into the recreation center at the bottom of the projects and get the piano and pull the piano out next to the basketball court and play to the game of basketball. And then he demonstrated, Brother Ah demonstrated kind of like the way Monk would play this song. The song is called Evidence, how he would play the song, which is a very kind of like, it's like the notes kind of like jump out of the air. You don't even think that they're in time with each other. They just seem like some kind of odd constellation that nobody's really been able to decipher yet. So the song Evidence sounds like that. And Brother I did all these moves to it. And I wrote it, I was like, yo, I know you're not asking for this, but, but I can't help but think about Monk and this basketball court,
Well, Monk was a huge influence on me. And it's a funny story, because how he became a huge influence on me was, I grew up in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and then on Sunday there was always very good TV, and I switched on the TV, and I see a man by himself at the piano, and it's a stand-up piano, and he's playing by himself, and I'm listening, and I'm thinking, whoa, what? He's like, what's happening here? Like, this is a very interesting way of piano playing. And I was familiar with music, like classical music, jazz, and I was like, man, this is amazing, And he was wearing, the little cap that he always had on. And then when it ended, it said his name on the screen, Thelonious Monk. And then I thought that he was Greek, because his name was Thelonious, which sounded like a Greek name.
Right, all those O's and U's.
And then I thought, wow, he's Greek like me, because I was made to feel Greek in Holland by people. Kids would always like say, if something went wrong, then they would refer to me by my nationality.
Wow.
Like I would become, oh, you fucking Greek, or whatever, you dirty Greek, that kind of thing. So, but then, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. Like a Greek guy plays music like this. And of course, that's a bit naive, and I figured that out later that Thelonious Monk, is African American guy, you know, black
Yeah.
guy from the United States, of course.
But he is a Greek god, right?
Yeah,
But that's
but
also, but what you pick up on is also his ability, you know, kind of what you said earlier about when you work with subjects is Monk's greatest ability is he allows space for you in the music.
mhm,
He leaves enough space. I mean, and just in how, I mean, literally, he's resting and letting music go by
mhm,
without off, you know, without playing anything. The rest is also the composition. It's not simply just the action he makes, but he always allows that part. And I think it's what still brings people to his music. Look, and not everybody likes that stuff either. But I know when I first heard it in the same way, you know, I heard it, my mother and father were looking at television of a plane wreck of of a politician they knew in Houston. So
uh-huh,
they were watching the wreckage on television, and but there was no audio coming from the television. The only audio was them listening to Thelonious Monk play Round Midnight as a solo piano piece.
uh-huh.
And so that became the commentary. And I thought in the same way, like he was like, who is this guy? You know,
Yeah,
my thought was like, who is this guy that deserves the honor, that made the honor his to make a music that could carry a heavy moment, like, you know, losing someone. And I looked at the thing, I looked at the image on the cover and this beautiful goatee and profile and a hat. And I
yeah,
thought,
I know that. I know that. Yeah,
that's who, you know, like that's who I want to be. And yeah, but he always is like, he leaves so much space in it. And that space is also intimidating too for a lot of people. People are like, yo, because it makes you, you know, it can make one have to reflect.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, like for me, he can't do no wrong. You know,
Yeah.
the other day I was playing like um, his big. He had a big band album that is really
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
I forget the title of it. Thelonious Sphere it says Sphere
Yeah.
Sphere Monk.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, so I mean, the truth is that Monk brought us together. I mean, we already knew each other.
Hmm.
I think, you know, through Kara,
Right.
basically, because you were um, working on the Calliope and stuff and all these things. But
Hmm.
like, I think that our collaboration with the park started really because we started really communicating a lot more, and then we did the rehearsal at your house. And for
Hmm.
me, the most important thing was actually, because since you brought it up live, you know, you can't go back, was for you to play the soundtrack in a performance, not go in a studio and then look at it and you play and then go, okay, let's go back, you know, and then
Edit
no,
this.
just
Yeah.
do, you know. And we did 2 takes. We did a take in rehearsal,
Right.
and then you did the performance, and that's the one, you know, and what was amazing about the performance was it's this small place
Right.
with Min Tanaka,
Yeah.
who danced with Cecil there watching,
Yeah. Yeah.
and other artists, the woman Fujiko Nakaya, she works with fog and
Oh
everything.
yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, these people are here, you know. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And that was for me the most important part, that um, that there was sort of a celebration of the film, but also a live performance at the same time, and
Hmm.
make that the soundtrack,
Hmm.
un, unedited as
Yeah.
well. I
Yeah.
mean,
It was also intimidating. Just because, you know, because the park is already perfection, you know, it's a community, you know, and the community is diverse. You know, they're listening to music, people are hanging out, they're playing a game, they're stopping, you know, there's all these movements in it too. I think was one of the things we started to notice was like,
yes,
oh, you know, like, okay, so this is this movement when the young kid comes out and he's ready to do the one-on-one, or this is the game, you know. And you know, like you know, basketball and life or whatever is all rhythm. And you know, one thing I learned, probably we could talk about this probably for a while, but
yeah,
even when working with skateboarders, you know, like sometimes I'll play a live concert and invite skaters to skate, and we'll do it around the half pipe or a bowl or something. Is if I'm playing the wrong music, they fall a lot, you know. And so I have to be careful about what is played when people are working, you know what I mean? Because it does have an effect. And I noticed it and I said, oh man, you know, not that music has power like that, it could injure people, but it does. Especially if somebody's focusing on their body, you know? So like listening to a basketball game, right, hearing the music that they're listening to in the park, you know, like what that feels like, what hip hop sounds like in Brooklyn, you know, in the summertime is a real thing. And it's necessary too, for people to express out loud, you know, through sound and the songs that they want to hear. But I would say the intimidating part was like, okay, so now we're going to just play along with that, you know? So now I'm
Yeah.
going to look more at look at the footwork, or I'm going to look at, you know, I'm going to look at the woman walking by with her stroller, her baby stroller, you know,
Mhm.
with the people who stop, you know, it allowed me to kind of like, you know, realize much of what I think also attracts people to New York City is the people.
Yeah, well, it's a celebration. It's a celebration of
Yeah,
people. I mean, as much as it is a celebration of basketball. And I
yeah.
and I first intended it as a silent movie,
Mm,
and then when you did that thing at the Kennedy Center, then I thought, oh, this is actually perfect. And then all of this happened. You did the performance, and the show was 3 weeks later, and I got the sound mix back,
yeah.
and Kara and I were in Hakuba in the Japanese Alps,
All
you
right.
know, and I was snowboarding in the day, and then at night I would have the movie with the music. Like
Mm,
finally, you know, I had lined it up,
mm-hmm.
and we just sit there and just look at it and get used to it, you know.
Right.
And I started feeling like, yeah, this is it's exact. It's how can I say it's exactly what I wanted, because that's not really what I
Yeah,
go for, right?
yeah,
Because I all those people, I wasn't directing
right,
anybody what to do,
right,
you know,
right.
but it's still all that I wanted from it. You know, I
Yeah.
got what I wanted from. I knew that I didn't have to go there 20 days in a row to get the footage. I knew
Mm-hmm.
any afternoon, if the weather is decent,
Mm-hmm.
set up the camera,
Mm-hmm.
things are going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and people are going back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like that path runs from the housing to the train, which is
Mm-hmm.
on Flatbush,
Mm-hmm.
and people just walk back and forth to the park, and they
Right.
stop, they
Yeah.
meet each other.
Yeah.
There's these girls that like stop, they meet each other,
Right.
and they get on the court. Little kids get onto the court.
Right.
One guy is walking with a suitcase, and the ball flies off the court. He catches it and passes it back in one fluid motion.
Yeah. 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 You know, yeah. That reminds me. I'm doing all this research right now on Louis Armstrong for a museum they're building for him in Queens, New York now. And so I was looking for like, what did, you know, early 20th century New Orleans, Louisiana look like? And you know who just took tons of footage of New Orleans in 1917 was Ford Motor Companies, you know?
I'm sure they did.
And they, you know, but they kind of like, there were these long shots of all these boats coming in to the port, long shots of a square with trolleys going by and people coming in, long shots of cotton being brought off of the ship into the being weighed, long shots of bananas being hoisted up and then sorted. And I thought, my God, you know, like how important it is to document the spaces you are in,
Yeah.
just period. Like it should be a requirement of everybody to document where they are. And that there aren't a ton of images, let alone moving images of New Orleans at the birth of one of the most powerful forms of music, you know, of jazz, early jazz, of which Louis Armstrong helps pioneer. And so I was thinking like, oh shit, that music from that time, that music is for the people who work that hard. And so it
Mhm.
sounds like that for a reason, you know. Hip hop sounds like that for a reason in the 80s or 90s. You know, it's different now, I think. But it sounded that way because it was for people in the community. It was another documentation form. But
Yeah.
when you talked about like kind of like documenting the park, it just made me think about how I just came away from watching those old films thinking how extremely necessary it was for somebody to just set up cameras and let them roll on neighborhoods that people lived in, because we just need them just as record keeping, let alone art, whatever. But we
Yeah.
just need it as a record of, nah, this is how it feels here. You know.
Yeah. I truly believe, like, I have, I had an exhibition at the Berkeley Museum, and that was called Within Arm's Reach. And that basically meant that, what, like, I photograph what is kind of near to me. I photograph when I travel, but mostly I photograph, when I walk down the block, and, everything. Like, I did this book, the Conrad McRae book, and it's
wow.
850 pages of a high school basketball tournament where I went for 6 summers in a row, which was because it was behind my house. But also, I have some neighbors. Gary is his name. He lives like close to me. He was born in the house that he lives in, and his family's from Tennessee, right? And Gary told me that his brother was going to celebrate his 60th birthday. He was going to come up from Tennessee, and like we're going to have the birthday party at his house. And it was over a weekend. And I walk back and forth. This is pre-COVID times too. And I start noticing there's 2 guys sitting on the stoop that I don't know, and I'm like, hey, you guys are here for the birthday? And they go, yeah. So, you mind if I take a picture of you guys? And they go, yeah, sure. No, I took a picture, and I came back. There was 3 guys. Oh, you mind if I take a picture? Always saying hello to whoever was there, take their picture. And then over 2-3 days, that's what I did. And then I developed the film, and I looked at the pictures, and I saw there was 12 different guys that I photographed. So I put together a little zine where everybody was in it, and I printed 15 copies, and I dropped 12 copies off at Gary's house.
Yeah.
And then when I went to get my haircut at the barber shop, they said to me, yo, Gary came in here and he brought that book you made. He was so happy.
Right.
And that's what like, I didn't make that. It was just, that was it,
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like, when you say pre-COVID times, right? There's also that part where, like how in the past few months, it's the past year now coming up, that shift of like kind of modes of creativity that have changed how we work, like even talk about, us linking up for you to shoot the photograph I used for this new record I just put out. And I just kept saying, do you need an assistant? You're like, nope. I said, my son could come up. Nope. I don't need anything. So it seems like you were already kind of pre-COVID, kind of a pre-COVID artist, because you just roll with the camera and whatever.
Yeah. I never use assistants, but I have like sometimes when I'm filming and equipment is heavy, or on commercial jobs, I've used assistants, but especially with portraits, I like to be alone, by my, like, so I can just, so that it's just about me and the other person,
Have you been out in the city like a lot, now, like shooting, or is it?
No, I take my camera out, but then, and I've taken some pictures, but not a lot. I haven't, for example, when the protests were happening, I went to a couple of them, and given my age, I was a little bit worried, but I thought, well, I should be part of it at least. So I went to some of those, and I took a few pictures, but I felt like this, when I looked around, I said, this is being documented already. Everybody's documenting this. So there's no pressure on me, because I feel pressure often to, like, I have to do this or register this, register that. So I thought I'd be more like a sort of participant than documenter. But I did, I have some photographs of, boarded up shops, like a boarded up Whole Foods with a woman in a wheelchair sitting in front of it, like that's the only person you see, or the way the Apple store was boarded up with very tasteful white painted boards, not like plain, not like plain plywood, and there was a little there's a little basketball court around the corner where these girls that are, I don't know, ranging from age 10 to 14 or something, they practice basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they were outside, even though it was kind of cold weather. So I went there a couple of weekends and took some pictures because I knew one of the girls, you know, one of the dads of the girls I knew, he just told me, just meet me outside, because that's another thing. We just met outside. I think normally we would have probably gone to a coffee shop because it was pretty cold.
Right.
And he said that his girl was doing basketball practice, so I brought a camera with me and I took a few photos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's deep, you know, because also the city there's no visitors here, you know, so it's New Yorkers here, and it's New Yorkers mostly, you know, if you're not an essential worker, you kind of are off the streets by the evening because there's kind of nothing to do. So the city, to a degree, I feel like the city is used half of the day. But then there are people saving the city, you know, like the people, the delivery people, the people working in the hospitals, you know, the mail workers, you know, the FedEx, the UPS. I mean, these like soldiers of humanity right now, you know, like I keep being taken by a kind of bravery that it takes to keep a city as important as New York City, even kind of slowing our blood, you know, like our you know, how fast our I don't know what I'm trying to say. What is the word? I can't, you know, like the speed at which your blood flows through your veins, but we're just slowing it down now, right? So we're making sure it still courses, but it's just on a much slower pace, tempo. And like I would go around the city and I would go like drive by like the jazz clubs, you know, Village Vanguard, you know, or you know, Smoke or Jazz Standard. It's now all these places. Some of these places might not even reopen, and there's a part that, you know, it's just like it's desolate here, and we still got a long way to go too, you know.
I know, but you know, like I have to say that the mailman and the UPS man, and you know, those guys that the ones that I know that do my block. Yeah, I've always appreciated those guys.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And you know, I always take care of them at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think about these people who, you know, like, you know, people who deserve medals of freedom.
Yeah, you know, you're a mailman, the mailman that comes with the truck, he comes multiple times a day, you know. And I look at him, and you know, he hasn't gotten sick, I guess, because I see him, you know, he's here all the time, and I'm worried about him, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that truck without him. I mean, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm worried about myself too, but I'm worried about him too.
Yeah.
And we have a relationship because of that. He brings stuff to me, but our relationship became even stronger because Tyshawn, who skates for Supreme, he was Thrasher Skater of the Year. There's a spot here called the Fish Gap, and he was doing the Fish Gap, and the Fish Gap is like, it elevates, like, and then it's like a loading dock, and then you jump down onto like a sloped area. And everybody does that. They go from the loading dock to the sloped area, but he wanted to do it the other way around, come off the sloped area up. But you need enough speed, so they were using one of those rent scooters, blue rental scooters, to pull him up. And I just happened to go get a coffee, and I saw those guys, so I was watching them, and I take a few pictures, and the mailman was there too, and he was checking it out. And then when I saw him the next day, we talked about that for 20 minutes, about how unbelievable it was that these kids were doing that, and you know, so I got to know him a bit, and
people still, skaters gonna still use the city.
Oh yeah, more so than ever.
Yeah,
graffiti riders and skaters, they're over. They're like, hell yeah, you're like gonna plywood everywhere for us.
I gotta appreciate that part. I gotta say that, you know, like watching that, you know, of what attracts me to New York, you know, like the street culture. finding this other way to reverberate in the city that still needs it,
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that also the last thing that that we kind of hung out at was Kara's opening back in March of
Okay.
2020, and so you and Kara had this amazing opening. I mean, that show was like surreal. Also, to just see that body of work was tremendous. And then we went to dinner afterwards, and Lucy Raven and Matthew Barney. And so just on what's today? Today is whatever today is. And then I guess, on Saturday, seeing you four again come to the opening downtown. And then as I was looking at you, I was like, oh, I had a sense memory because we hadn't all seen each other together. And I was like, oh, like when COVID was beginning to ravage New York City, we were the last people.
We had a dinner. Sat in a small room all together.
Yeah.
All starting to pray.
Right.
I'm curious.
And the city was getting quiet. It was like it was starting that moment. And but it was good to see everybody. But that felt good. Also, like the modified habit we have of how to gather, which to a degree, I don't think it's going to go out of style for a while. It's going to be, it will only evolve, but it won't leave, but seeing you all again was like, oh, it was a bit of a kind of a wave of like, kind of knocked me back for a second.
Yeah, that was, yeah. And then what was interesting, because I'd like to, bring attention to the fact that to the new album that you just put out on Bandcamp. The sound will tell you, and how we did a portrait session together a few days before you decided to use the picture for the release, and you sent me a preview, and I listened to it, right away, and a tremendous record, tremendous solo record, and really, in a way, and we have listened to it quite a bit now, both Kara and I, more than 20 times already, because it's things you need. Like, if you want to know something, then it's like you want to practice a 3-pointer, and you're gonna have to try a few times. So we listened to this record, and we listened to it, and we had it on. There's a difference, right?
Right.
When it's playing, and I'm doing something else, then it's playing, or I sit down and I listen, and so when I came to the exhibition and I looked at the works, which are these drawings that are a result of you putting paper, as I understand it, on the keyboard, and then you play. And so looking at these works and seeing this sort of, how can I say, there's a precision and a non-precision to them. Like, you can see, okay, this area got touched a lot, but there's sort of a flow in it too.
Yeah.
Like a shadow, like that you talk about in the music. And so that was fascinating. And then to hear you say that you did all of that outside.
Yeah. Make the work outside. Yeah. I mean, also because I don't have a studio. And so I use my in-laws' backyard as a place to set this up, because it's also pretty messy with all that dry pigment everywhere. But since this was all happening kind of in March, I started in March making these new works, and also started trying to write during that time too, because and I wouldn't even say it was writing, it was just kind of more like a journal. You sit down and you play something, and then 7 minutes later something falls out, and then you write that down, and that ends up becoming the piece. So the works on the wall kind of became surrogates for the concerts I never got to perform, for all of last year. And the songs themselves became kind of the weight and the heaviness of what it felt like to live through 2020. And all the uprisings, you know, whether it was about class, whether it was about gender, whether it was about race, whether it was about the art itself, you know, whether it was about the mismanagement of the country, which has long been going on. And so I couldn't, as much light as I like to bring to things, also with just having these works that just weren't feeling like that. And I wanted to acknowledge it too. So just say like beginning of 2021, a new exhibition, you know, and a new set of piano works that kind of like at least say that 2020 happened and now we're in 2021, you know. So to just try to start this year on a creative tear, you know, to not sit back, but more like try to bite into the time. So felt good to have now people to listen to the record or someone come see the exhibition, because you know, we're going to have to like kind of get our energy back again this winter to hit the spring, you know, and the rest of the year with some kind of ferociousness that I think people will enjoy because they'll need some joy.
I know. Well, I'm not stopping anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been making things, you know, throughout and putting I put a website out there where people can view my movies.
That website is amazing. And these t-shirts, which I'm waiting for, look amazing. And the zines, you know, like, I think we talked on the phone about Cecil Taylor for a minute. And then you just like, oh, look at this. And then here's this, you know, this thing that you just made, right? So you're, you know, in kind of a rapid fire moment.
Yeah. There's only 10 of those.
Beautiful. Okay. So now it's an artifact.
Yeah. You have one. Hamza Walker has one.
Nice.
Archie Rand, who introduced me to Cecil, has one, and Jay Saunders from Artist Space, who you know, he worked on those concerts.
Yes, he did.
Where we saw each other.
That's right.
And remember, and you were with. Who are you with? With your drummer? Yeah.
Yeah, I was with Nasheed Waits. Yeah. That's right.
And you guys were like, well, where are we going to sit? And I said, come sit with us. Yeah, but
right. Yeah.
Reserved for us. For you. Forget about all these people that think have reserved seats.
That was such a special night, right? That probably happened, I would say, a lot, you know, during this time too. Was more kind of like the recall of things that happened in the past, you know, looking at images from that night, even looking at images of when we were in Japan together, you know, making the piece, you know, looking back on kind of the experiences that were transformative that still have like so many kernels of you know, of protein still in them in a kind of historic sense.
Oh my, yeah. And you know, that the fact that we did the performances in Japan is already on its own. You know, when this idea came up and they said, you know, the exhibition is going to be at Fergus McCaffrey in Tokyo. And I thought, okay, it makes total sense. We'll figure out how to get Jason over there and play in Tokyo, you know, and bump into Ron Carter at the hotel.
Yeah, that was great.
like, yo, what's up? And
that's great.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's
great.
there, you know, and this is a place, you know, this is a place that appreciates jazz.
Yeah.
This is a place where, you know, they put out Albert Ayler records.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, you don't want to put out an Albert Ayler record, we'll put it out.
Yeah. No, that was, and that's I feel like also that's like how good music is made, or good communities kind of like find themselves. It's where, you know, you're confirmed in your decisions over and over. Whether you turn a corner, you say, oh, okay, I'm in the right place. You know what I mean? At the right time, with the right intention too. You know, you're confirmed by those whatever decisions that seem kind of like, oh, well, we'll just try to do it right around this time, you know. But then when it happens, you're like, oh no, this is a magic hour, you know.
Yeah. This is like, that's what it is. And that's not always so easy, you know, in a way where things, you know, are always planned, you know, ahead of time, exhibitions and everything, but to have an opportunity of chance and you know, like the place where we performed, and then across the street happens to be a temple, and they did that little documentary, you know, for the gallery, and they asked the monk, the head monk, if we could go there and talk to each other, and he welcomed us, you know.
Right.
And I was just like, wow, where this is like. And now, you know, now the film, the museum is opening and closing, but it is, you know, it's playing in Dublin.
Yes. It's my, you know, it's my other homeland. Where, you know, all the Morans, I send them all my love in Ireland. Because also, you know, like I keep thinking, you know, like there's one part about when people experience work, you know, that they really kind of make it public that they experience something, but it's really in the people who didn't say nothing about what they experienced, and they just kind of live with it, you know. Oh, I went and saw this piece, you know, I didn't know there was a piece shown, and I saw this piece about I don't know, maybe it's about a basketball court, you know. And also that people don't get to travel, as, you know, art has to go places because to let people know that there's somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, like I love Dublin so much because there a lot of, I don't know, I guess it was one of the places that also embraced the music and the story of the people that made it in a way that maybe some other countries in Europe kind of like regard differently. So I know that there's an audience that hungers for the music, just like I hunger for a good pint.
In a bar full of Irish people.
Yes. Yes.
To do it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, U Lane is like a special museum, and it's unfortunate, you know, that we haven't been able to go there ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe we will one day. I don't know. That I don't want to really, but I think that, you know, I'm always proud that, you know, that it's there and it's living there, and it was open, you know, it was open and closed, and you just got to imagine that people walked in. It's this group show, but you know, my project pretty large. They walk into there, and then they hear this piano music, which you probably hear before you see it.
Yeah.
But then when you're there, you can be absorbed in either or both. And then they're in Dublin, but they're looking. They're sitting in the park in Fort Greene.
Yeah.
That's what you see there.
Yeah.
Because this film, I don't want it to be shown on online or, you know, on TV or none of that. You know, this film needs to be at the size that I decided needs to be projected, so that when you look at it, you're there, and you're sitting on the lawn with me. I just want to say, you know, happy Martin Luther King Day, man.
That's right. Happy MLK Day. Yeah, it means something.
It means a lot.
He means something. I was just reading, actually, we read it on his birthday a few days ago. Like, you know, he wrote the opening speech for the 1963 Berlin Jazz Festival on their first year. You know, he wrote this speech talking about the power of the music and the power of liberation. You know, so you know, liberation through representation. You know,
exactly. He knew music. Just listen to how he spoke.
Oh God, yes, yeah. So this is a day, good day to also meet up to talk to.
Yeah, true visionary. Yeah.